Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
Thing that I wanted to bring chat to today, I sent you an article about the era of the unsackable worker, and it's a slacker's paradise. And I thought this was quite interesting, purely because of some of the examples these guys gave. Because I've done some of these things, and I don't. Well, I say I've done some of these things, but the example the guy was giving that they're playing golf, and the guy is one of his mates has gone off to the side and on a phone call. And one of the other guys asks, is he in trouble with his wife? And he says, no, he's just trying to tell his boss that he's busy, or keep his boss thinking he's busy. And I thought, it's not so much we do that, but, I have been, this was still back in the day of being in the office 5 days a week. I remember being in the audit, and they moved the audit day to a day that was a holiday here in the UK. And I said, look, I booked a golf thing, and I'm not skipping the golf. So if you want me to be on the audit, I'll walk around the whole course with the headphones on, and I'll answer questions, but I'm playing golf. And I did that. I walked 18 holes, and I played one of the best golf games I've played, and I participated in the audit. And I was joking with the partner that I had, I'm not ignoring you. I'm being audited right now, or my company's being audited. I was an internal audit, so it's not that it was marking your own homework in some respects. But he kept saying that every time I got distracted by taking my headphones out to talk to him, I played worse golf, and he kept saying, no, just keep your headphones in and carry on playing. And that was, when I read this, I was like, yeah, okay, I can see that. But I think there is a level of people that do take the liberty, because the technology exists, that they can go and do 7 hours of having fun and only do 1 hour's worth of work. And it's very difficult unless you've got the technology, some sort of mechanism to figure this stuff out. I'm not saying monitoring, because monitoring is not really all of it. I think there's a bit of figuring it out. You can't really tell if someone's, not doing something or doing something. Even if you think that someone in the office can sit there all day long and do nothing as well, you don't have to be outside the office to do nothing. I don't know what you thought about this article.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It made me think of all the managers who really want people back in the office, seeing this headline and feeling very justified. Like, yes, there are people who are slacking off because they're not visible, and I think it's always there's kind of a spectrum of it, right? Like, who decides what is a acceptable use of an employee's break time or anything like that. Because one of the examples that gave in the article as well was, I think, going on a walk for an hour, which is something I'll do, walk 30 minutes to an hour in the middle of my work day. It doesn't mean I'm still working an 8-hour day, but that's just something that, because I'm not commuting anymore in the morning and the afternoon, I take the middle of the day to get some exercise in, which, improves my mental and physical well-being. I think makes me a better employee overall. So I thought that was kind of an interesting example of like shirking on the job, because that's not something I would consider. I hope most people wouldn't think of something like that as irresponsible.
Well, and I don't see anything wrong with that. I do that not every day, but most days. I'll go for a walk during the day, and mine are usually 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes it's a run. And I find that as a very good way to break the day up. Also, if you're thinking about something and you need, you could brute force it by staring at a screen trying to do it, or you can go for that walk and let process. And I listen to podcasts and all the rest. And sometimes you listen to a podcast and you're really just thinking about the work thing, and you solve the work thing. Now you want to get back home to do the thing. So I think there's definitely value, and there is science that backs up that getting out of the office for a walk in the sun, especially, is good for you. So I think it's the right thing to do. In fact, it's something that my previous company and this company, I tell people to go for a walk. Don't feel like you have to work 11 hours behind a desk. Go for a walk, go to gym, spend a little time with your kids, whatever it is. Because you're only really going to expect, anyone who thinks you can get more than this, you only really get 6 hours productivity out of a person anyway a day. Mental stuff. You can do a lot of calls and stuff like that, but if you're really looking for quality work, after about 6 hours, it starts to degrade, no matter how much you stimulate yourself with caffeine or whatever else. 6 hours is what you expect. So as long as you're doing your 6 hours of good work, use the other time. Be balanced. I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's just some of this is just shifting when we're talking about remote work and office work, which this article was broader than that. It was talking about really all sectors. They brought up restaurant workers, for example. But just going back to the kind of office worker example, if you think about being in the office and getting up to go to the fancy office coffee machine and taking 5-10 minutes to have that make your coffee and then going back to your desk, that's maybe a 15-minute break. But if you're at home and you throw in a load of laundry and that takes you 5 minutes, and then when it dings that it's done, you go and you move it to the dryer, is that, it's the same for things that are the same amount of time, just because it's a different action or something that is, we talk a lot about, integrated working, integrating your work and your life tasks. It's not taking up any more time. It's just a different type of break. And I think that still makes some people kind of uncomfortable, I guess. It doesn't seem like it's a work thing. So why would you be doing it during your work day?
Yeah, it's a guilt thing. It's a guilt thing. I still struggle with this. If I've got work to do, like now today, 9 to 6, there's some admin stuff that I got to do for the house. I always feel guilty about doing it. But then you sort of think, well, when else would you do it? Because the best time to make phone calls to a company will be during work time. And I remember, in the various companies I worked in, especially as a youngster, because most of my career up until my first real job was always do my own thing. So I'd be a consultant, or I'd build something for someone or whatever it was. So I was always managing my time. And if I had a project to build, I was working on that thing flat out. Not sleeping. I built an application once. I watched all the James Bond movies while I was working on it. So I can tell you how long it took, because you can just take all the 22 movies and put them together in sequence, and that's how long it took to build it. So there was no such thing in those days for me. Look, I was an 18-year-old, 17-year-old, so there were no life pressures to deal with. But that's how I went into the working force, is that, if you've got to get something done, nothing else matters till that thing's done. And I actually get very frustrated with people. Like, I'd have a meeting, it'd be something urgent, and then I'd walk out and the guy goes, yeah, okay, I'll work on that later. I was going to phone my car insurance guy and renegotiate my quote. I'd be like, that's not important. Like, this piece of work's important. And it took me a long time to get over that. And I think that's what makes this new way of working in some respects for a lot of people difficult, is they don't know what those boundaries are. Like you say, if you look at a smoker goes outside, has a cigarette. It's a cigarette that takes a couple minutes. It's the walk outside. It's the walk back inside. That's a lot of breaks in a day if they smoke a lot. How is that? Why is that not a guilt thing? Because they're in the office, versus the person who's cleaning their house, doing their laundry, doing their filing, whatever it is, packing their clothes away, which are all things that give them time later, but also work on the back of their mind if they're not doing it. Why do we feel guilty about that stuff? I think it's just we let ourselves feel guilty for it, and we shouldn't. As long as your work's getting done, and as long as the employer is getting what they're paying you for as an output, it should be results driven.
Yeah, I think that's what we keep coming back to as well, is that, ultimately, if it's affecting the quality of their work, there needs to be a way, you need to have things in place where you're measuring that. And if you don't, that points to probably something that should have been there to begin with, is some way of assessing performance that's a bit more objective, right? So besides just, they seem present, they have a good personality, they must be doing a good job. That's a very different thing. So,
and I think asynchronous work. In fact, who's the CEO of Microsoft? What's his name?
Satya Nadella.
Yes, he was on a podcast the other day. He was saying this as well. Is that where Microsoft is going? They're enabling asynchronous work, and that's the work that I think we need to get into, the work style. Just because you send an email doesn't mean you should get a response straight away. Just because you send a Teams message doesn't mean you should get a response straight away. What it should mean is that the person that needs to pick it up can pick it up in their time to respond to it. Now, if it does mean that you have to get a call together and all that kind of stuff, you'll arrange those things. That's what adults should be doing. But the point is that if you've put something out there, and if you look at these daily emails you get from Microsoft, if you're on an Office 365 platform, they're going through your email and they're looking for all the tasks, all the outstanding actions in your email that you've sent out, so you can keep track. And it's that kind of stuff. So you sent someone an email last week, Monday, they haven't replied to you, and it's now Tuesday. You now get an email from Microsoft saying, do you want to follow up with Heather about this thing? And you say, yes, I do. No, I don't. Maybe it was an open-ended thing and there was no follow-up. Or maybe you already had a call about it, so it's already been dealt with. But at least they're picking it up for you. So your mental fatigue is not there. So I think that's quite an interesting play to move down the asynchronous route. And I think that's, if you can get, especially like my team is from Australia now to Washington State. So we are +10, -11 time zone. So almost exactly across the board. There's no way that I can have everyone collaborate together at the same time. It's just impossible now. Even if we alternate, 1 hour early, 1 hour late, that still doesn't work. So we have to figure out asynchronous ways of working. And I think that's where the tooling has to update. And little tricks like this from Microsoft are really useful. In that sense, I think that they're on the right track.
Yeah, those. I think it's part of Viva Insights. Maybe I think the more that kind of stuff gets automated and it takes off that mental load is really nice. It's definitely, you're having a meeting and these documents might be related. Then yeah, I really like that part of Outlook. But yeah, I have teammates as well who start, for the most part of who I work with, there's people who start 5 hours before me and people who end 3 hours after. So when I'm going, if I take my 30-minute, 45-minute walk in the middle of the day, I'm probably still working a little bit earlier or later than my time zone. So that's part of it too. But I also will, if it's afternoon my time, that means it's 5 p.m. for the folks in Ireland, or if it's before noon my time, that means it's very early, or if it's the start of my day, it's very early for the folks on the West Coast. So what I'll do is use Slack message scheduling. Usually for Slack, I haven't played around with it too much for email, but it's useful that way too. But particularly for instant message, I've been trying to be mindful about, I'll just schedule the message. Because what I don't like is when I send something and I know it's 10 p.m. in someone else's time zone and they reply. Granted, like everyone should be able to manage their work how they want to. I just don't want anyone to feel obligated to reply to a message just because I'm sending it at a time that makes sense for me.
Yeah, there was what's her name? She wrote the book Grit. She has a signature, which I wanted to put on my signature. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it now that I remembered again today. You put a signature on your email that says, "This, just because I've sent this email now doesn't mean I require a response in my working hours. You can respond in your own working hours." Something like that. Some nicely way of phrasing that. And I think that's what we have to give everyone permission, that it's okay to not be available 24/7. I've noticed it with people more now. That they're signing out of Teams at the end of the day. I don't, because it's too many devices to sign out of. But and it's a habit to check just in case something's happened, which is a very bad habit. But I've noticed how many people are signing up, so there's actually not a lot of traffic to deal with. Now, when I've worked for other organizations, you can be online 24/7. There's always something to be involved in, and if you're online, someone will always pick you up. So you've really got to set those boundaries and stick to them yourself. I mean, it's a self-discipline thing too, and I think that's something that's also. I was explaining this to someone the other day about this guilt as well. So you feel guilty for doing your housework during work time, but you don't feel guilty about checking your email on the weekend or checking your team chats or doing a PowerPoint presentation on the weekend, when you should be doing something with the family. You don't, I don't feel guilty about it, but that's the thing, is it's got to work both ways. And I think that's coming back to this more fluid way of working or living. Because you're home, you're saving the time of commuting. Because the other thing is, I'm going on a daisy chain of ideas here. There was a thing about, does your commute count as part of your workday or not? And I don't know what the right answer is, but in theory, the minute you leave your door and you take the train to go to work, that's part of your workday. So even if you're working a 9 to 6, if you add the commute on, it's actually a 7 till 8. That's 11 hours. And I don't think a lot of people see it that way. It's almost been accepted for a long time that the commute was your own time or kind of shared time, because you could do what you want on your commute. It's technically, you wouldn't be doing that commute if you weren't working.
Yeah. No, I think most companies in the US would say the attitude is definitely that your commute is not part of your workday. Which, yeah, it's interesting. It gets blurrier and blurrier with technology, right? Because it could be part of your workday. Like, let's say you're driving into the office and you have an early morning call and you take that first call on the phone in your car, that's kind of part of your workday. But if if you're taking the train and you can answer emails, it's like, what's the line in terms of what you can count as integrated working?
Well, I think there was actually a thing about it here in the UK, and I can't remember what the actual result was. I think it's a European Union thing as well. I mean, I have always, and this is where, again, comes back to mindset. I've always seen any action, the minute I check an email first thing in the morning, my day started work-wise. Not that I'm saying I'm putting in 12 hours a day or 14 hours a day continuous work, but it's the start of the day. And then at the end of the day, it's the last time I check. Now, I have got into the good habit of not checking everything at 10 o'clock at night, because I know that'll keep me awake if there's something there. But I do have an 8 o'clock last check, maybe 8:30, and then I don't check it again. But that's, if you take that from 6 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, that's a long day. And sometimes it will be something that you'll see at 8 o'clock at night that you're like, oh, I just better do this one thing. My wife will shout at me, it's time to go to bed, and I've been working on an email for an hour and a half that I had to write that explains something or something like that. It happens, and those should be the exception, not the rule. And there are going to be days that those things happen. So be it. Which is why I find those loafing things so interesting, because I don't think it's a case of people are loafing. I think it's a case of trying to find direction and a way of working in this new way that suits what they do. And in some cases, it's difficult for both the manager and for the employee, because the manager also doesn't know what the boundaries are to be pushing, back on.
Yeah, I think we're coming out with a new set of expectations, and I wonder if this is going to be part of, employee handbooks going forward, like some do's and don'ts, or just like workplace etiquette. But it does feel like it would be useful to have, and it could just be between, someone and their manager, right, to have these open conversations about, what kind of maybe being at the golf course on a full normal work day to just answer a call to seem like you're busy is not, that's not really working. But if you, want to go for a walk or throw your laundry in or, tuck your kids in or whatever it is, that you don't need to feel guilty or like irresponsible for doing so.
No, and often my walks, I make phone calls. If I'm on a podcast, I'll catch up with people, phone them, whatever it is. And, a lot of the areas that I walk are very quiet, so you can do that. And then I feel like that's the win. I mean, I have talked to my wife about getting an under the desk, what do you call those things? Treadmill. But I think there's importance to getting out, especially like now. I'm staring out my window and it's very sunny. I'm definitely going to go for a walk after this call because it's a lovely sunny day and I can make 2 phone calls, and that's productive. I get my walk in and I get 2 phone calls in, and the person I'm talking to, whether they care or not about me walking, probably they might say, but I probably empower them to do the same thing. And if everyone's healthier, you get more work done. Which I think is another point to all of this: mental health and physical health.
Yeah, definitely. No, I actually like that idea of scheduling a walking meeting. That would be a fun thing to do. Mm.
Yes, and I think there's I want to say it's a Japanese thing, but I might be wrong in this. But there was a thing about I can't remember which company it was. All their meeting rooms are cocktail tables, so there's no seats. So your meetings are really quick, and you have to stand. Which I think is great because I think we spend, it's funny. Last week, for 2 weeks, I've been sitting at the dining table. My back's been killing me. This week and a bit of last week, I built a standing desk downstairs, and I've been standing. My back pain is gone. And that's just a simple change that it's those little things that make things better. And plus, I find the minute you start standing, you think differently. And there's a difference. I think there's still a difference between like standing and talking is better than sitting and talking, and I think sitting and working is better than standing and working. And I don't know. There's no science behind this. It's just my opinion.
I find that to be true as well. I have a standing desk, and I usually try to stand for calls and sit when I'm, especially writing. I find anything that if I'm standing and I notice like something's uncomfortable, it kind of breaks me from my flow. But I'm glad you brought up Japan, because this is something that I was thinking about as well. It's just, for a long time, right, we've just had cultural differences in the way that different countries work differently. And now that more and more organizations are thinking about working for a global organization, and how some of these new things, are, I guess, just different cultural shifts as well. But I think it's Japan, right, where after lunch people take a nap. Is that Japan? I can't remember. There's some country Japan, where
could be Spain, siesta, Mexico.
Some might exist in a few cultures, but just I can't imagine in the U.S. like coming back from lunch and people are slumped over their desks taking a break. But Facebook has nap pods, and a lot of tech companies will have stuff like that. So it's all just a matter of office culture.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm speaking at an event next week, an Event event for a whole bunch of CIOs, and I was talking to one of the leaders that'll be doing it with me, and I made a joke about how can you go back into an office that's open plan with worse kit than you've got at home, provided you've got the means, obviously. I've got a private room at home. I've got, I've kitted out all my stuff because I'm a technologist. And I take my 10-minute nap at 2:00 every day. Now I can't do that. How are you going to bring me back to an office where it's open plan, it's noisy, I don't have my nap time? And I mean, I'm talking about full-on sleep. I do a 10-minute meditation. I'm not going to do that at my desk. All those things go out the window. So your productivity goes out the window. And also, and that nap time, I mean, I can understand if it's Japan, because those guys push long hours. Your brain needs it. I mean, Da Vinci and those people, those sort of, Lord geniuses, all took naps. In fact, some of them slept in the polyphasic sleeping, which was like 20 minutes every 3 hours. so they could do all the stuff they wanted to do. So I think it's we're becoming a lot more aware of what the human body can do, and it's not a machine. And a lot of these work practices were based on a factory mindset, based on machines. And when you unpick all those things, it makes no sense to be working factory 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a good thing that we're having these conversations now and that people are kind of setting boundaries. And yes, there is this power shift where people are less fearful of being let go because, labor is in demand. But at the same time, we've seen productivity continue to increase. So I think it's a stretch to say that, everyone's just loafing all the time and no one cares anymore. I mean, everyone I work with, people I talk to every day can tell how incredibly hard people are working. It doesn't matter where they are. So I think it's good that we can have more boundaries and integrate with our lives.
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong pull from leadership to bring people back to an office, and I think the one thing which does make sense to me is around the energy. So if you've got an office full of people and they're all pulling together, you can feel the energy. And if you bring a customer in and there's no one there, they don't see that. Now, that's not to say that you should all be in the office to be like a rent-a-crowd to make the energy. But I think there's a level of, like we got our CEO coming out next week, so we're all going to be in the office Monday, Tuesday. But that's constructive. He hasn't met most of us face to face, so we're going to go do that. 1 or 2 days of a month going to an office is not a train smash, and it doesn't. I don't think you need to keep the office open as a huge space for those 1 to 2 months. I think that's where co-working spaces and all that stuff makes sense. The other thing with that sort of energy thing, I think it goes two ways. If you force people in, then they won't bring the energy. But if you let them have the choice, and this comes down to the way we talk to people, the way we treat them, I think you'll get more out of people, more loyalty by giving them the flexibility to make those decisions, which makes retention and attraction of new staff and new hires easier.
Absolutely. I think it's so individual too. I mean, you talk about energy in the office, that just makes me have flashbacks to like noisy open office spaces and having to wear noise canceling headphones all day because I'm someone who's if I'm in the zone, right, I need like dead silence. So those kind of environments were a bit of a nightmare for me productivity wise, because I was always distracted by people moving around or having side conversations or someone's phone going off or the coffee machine going or whatever it was. I think just want to push back a little bit on the idea that there's like this energy force that just makes things better. I mean, I think it's nice to kind of come together and have the, I guess, collaboration and camaraderie and feel like you're part of a team in that way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're more productive.
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument for new people, graduates, etc., to be around people in the office to get the culture. I mean, I've worked in companies where I've started from day one and I've been remote for like 8 months, 9 months. And the only way to get information that is to be on the phone with people in other countries to learn. And I think that it's not the best way to do it, but I think it's possible. But I think you've got to have that balance with the meetups. You've got to have, once a quarter, once every 2 months, whatever it is, people get together and go for lunch, not necessarily come into the office just to sit in the office, but go for lunch and talk to each other and, or do small little team building things. They don't have to be completely orchestrated, but you've got to break the barriers somehow.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this as well, right? Is that one of the hardest parts about working fully remotely is finding ways to form social relationships, and that things like virtual happy hours or games, as like well-intended as they are, don't necessarily create the environment where you can have natural conversations as you would in an office, just, saying hello and goodbye to people during the day or talking by, the water cooler, whatever it is. So I think you're right that there's It's tough to be fully remote and to never meet people because you're just never going to have a certain level of social interaction that can just help make working relationships more comfortable because you feel a little bit more like you know a person a little bit better.
Yeah, look, I think that's very important. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very excited to meet some of the guys next week, because I haven't met them in person, is that establishes the baseline relationship. Even when I worked in other organizations, with the US or in the Asia office, I always try to get one trip in at least to one of those locations to meet people, because then the conference calls and the face calls and Skype for Business in those days are a little bit easier because you've had a chat face to face, so the body languages are, the brains already connected, and also if you've gone out to see them, I'm pretty sure there's a social thing about this, but by going out to see them, they respect you for coming. So you can have a deeper conversation because you've built a bridge, which I don't think you always do over video. But who knows how this all plays out? Maybe we start getting into a cycle where people travel more because they've got the flexibility to work wherever they want, and you build your relationships that way. But both traveling to a place to see each other, but also to experiment with the place, because that becomes normal. I'm going to be in Japan next week in Okinawa. Oh, me too. Yeah, okay. Well, let's meet for dinner while we're there. I've got the wife and kids with me. I don't, whatever it is, and you just cross paths while you're carrying on in your own adventure.
Yeah, that is interesting. Lots of possibilities for how things could, for how this will all play out. But I think things are overall moving in a more positive direction in terms of not being the work robots, as you have said.
Yeah. Cool. We've had a good chat. Time to end there, I think.
Yep. I'll let you go on your walk.
Thanks, Heather. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Yes, sir. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.